Welcome to the Thrive TV Show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV Show. I'm Lauren Parsons, your host, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Michelle Huntington from over in Sydney, Australia, and we are speaking about you don't have a communication problem, you have a clarity problem. So thank you so much for joining me, Michelle. Welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. It was great. It's great to catch up with you again after seeing you last week in Sydney.
So wonderful. The thing that I love about speaking is getting to connect with amazing people at conferences. And we actually met at the Professional Speakers Conference a while ago and then got to catch up. And it's so nice when you say, oh, let's catch up when you're next in town. But we actually did it and had a beautiful dinner, a lovely Italian restaurant last week. So thank you for, again, for your time then and especially for your time today, because I have found of everyone that I've heard speak recently, Michelle, I keep mentioning your FFF technique to people. I keep quoting you on it and things like that. So I'm really excited to share these insights that I know are going to be so helpful for people because communication is just such a key part of what we do in life. So for those that are listening, we're going to focus on three things. We're going to talk about NITS, and how NITS turns vague communication into clear communication in less than 30 seconds. How FFF, the triple F technique, helps you cut through the noise and separate facts from feelings and stop responding or reacting on emotion. And how to use these tools anywhere, whether it's in a meeting, in a crisis, a family argument, any situation to help you stay calm, clear, and in control. So before we dive into that, Michelle, I'd love to ask you my this and that questions, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Dogs, nice. Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Okay. Beach front or mountaintop?
Beach.
Okay, nice. Would you rather play 10 musical instruments beautifully or speak 10 languages fluently?
Oh, that's a hard one. Oh, they're kind of the same. Outside of my reach right now. Oh, I'd have to say probably musical instruments.
Okay, I know that you're very artistic and very creative, so very interesting. Let me tell you a little bit more about Michelle. Michelle Huntington is a former airline captain, one of only 500 women in the world to hold that rank. After 20 years of flying through storms, engine failures, high stakes moments at 35,000 feet, she now shows leaders how to stay clear-headed when pressure spikes. She teaches the aviation tools that pilots use to communicate fast, to make decisions when lives are on the line, and to avoid knee-jerk reactions that create chaos. She's the author of Lady MacGyver, Unbelievable Stories with Altitude, and I have read this book. I think once I got it, I devoured about half of it the next morning. So such a good read, and I'm very critical of books. It's such a beautiful, tightly written book, just one thing to the next, and great storytelling. Loved it. So highly recommend this. She's also on the podcast and co-host of the podcast Captain and the Clown, along with her husband. And she's on a mission to prove that pressure doesn't have to break you. It can make you better if you know how to think. So Michelle, just tell us, let's start by sharing what is it that you love about what you're doing now?
Oh, I think you touched on it earlier about meeting lots of people, traveling and meeting lots of people. So traveling has been in my wheelhouse for the last 25 odd years, being a pilot. And I love that, not only operating the aircraft, but the people that you meet and visiting places all around the world. But it's the people. So when I was flying in an airline, it was very much who you flew with made your day. And as a captain, you actually set the tone on that. So if you were having a bad day, you really had to step up and, pull yourself out of it because you knew that it would affect others. What I love about speaking community, speaking with other speakers, and also the people that I meet when I go to conferences, when I go to businesses, that being able to, one, influence people is amazing, but learning from them also, just meeting people who I would never have met potentially, or if they've been flying with me, they've been behind the flight deck door, they've been the other side, so I haven't known about them. So I love just the variety. I could be teaching the same workshop, I could be doing the same keynote, but just the energy that other people bring, what they want from it, their significance, and how it affects just the energy in the room, everyone around. It's like a drug. You just can't get enough.
Yeah. And you've just had such an extraordinary and interesting life. I watched your TED talk a few weeks ago. That's just amazing talk. And I don't want to necessarily spoil it for people, but it's just such an incredible story of you island hopping your way in a tiny plane and just all of the, I mean, I'm sure there's so many more really challenging scenarios that you found yourself in. And, today we're talking about communication. So, do you want to just share a story about, or just tell me a bit about why do you think communication is so important and why is it important to get it right and for it to be clear?
Sure. I don't know, like I'm guilty of, say, reading a text message, and depending on my energy and what I've been looking and reading and feeling that day is how I interpret it. And other people, being culture, being experience, again, their energy, what they've dealt with in the day or what they're going to do, the same words can be interpreted in so many different ways. And like there's a famous thing of, she didn't take my laptop. And depending on where you put the emphasis or the emphasis, she didn't take my laptop or she didn't, that sort of thing.
Yes, she didn't take
Communi-
my laptop.
that's right. That's every single word can completely change the meaning if you emphasize it. So the in aviation, communication cannot be misinterpreted because it has dire consequences.
Yes.
So communication was very important. We had set phrases that we used, so you knew exactly what it was. And we also had a method of communicating things that were maybe outside, unusual, out of the ordinary, weren't a typical day. And so that, one, we got the correct information across, but most importantly, we knew that it was understood how we required it to be. That was a technique that we use, which is NITS, which we'll talk about today.
Yeah. Well, tell me, yeah. So
Yeah,
NITS, it sounds horrible, doesn't it? But really powerful. So NITS.
ITS.
So run through what they mean and then expand that for us.
Yeah, so NITS, what we would do is if there's something happen on the ground in the air, and as I mentioned, it was unusual. It wasn't a normal part of your day or operation. So that we could convey all of the information. Because quite often, if people don't understand, they just don't have all the facts.
Yes.
And it's easy to get frustrated at the person who's lacking the understanding, but take a step back and actually look at what have you given. So, and we were taught, it was drilled into us as captains that it was on us, not the person receiving the information. So therefore, there's this technique or acronyms everywhere in aviation,
Yes.
NITS. So N is for nature. Nature is what's actually happened.
Okay.
So the engine has caught on fire. The left-hand engine's caught on fire. I is for intent, what we're going to do about it.
Okay.
So the left engine's caught on fire. We're shutting it down and we're going to return to Sydney. Then time, it's going to take us 20 minutes to run through the checklist and then to get clearance. I'm going to seat you in 5 minutes and give you a double ding. And that's the code for the cabin crew to be seated.
Okay.
Then S is special circumstances. So in aviation sense, it would be upon landing, it's going to be very fast, and the fire brigade or the fire engine is going to follow us all the way to the bay.
Okay.
And then, so I've given my information. I then ask the cabin crew member or the person I've just given that to, repeat it back.
Okay. So looping for understanding.
Absolutely. And they can write it down. There's nothing wrong with writing down information. I think in society it makes us look like maybe we're weak or we're not as good as we should be. I've met a lot of people who you meet them and they pull a little pocketbook out of their and they write down your name because I don't want to forget you. And it's like, oh, that's amazing. I love
How
that.
good is that? I'm just going, yeah, that's great. Because so often
Yeah.
people say, oh, I'm terrible with names. Well, number one, if you want to get good at names, stop saying that you're terrible with names. And number
Yes.
two, you've got to learn to like pay attention, don't you, at that point when you meet someone. And
Yes.
I often use the technique if it's not just a everyday name, I'll ask people, how do you spell that?
Yes.
And people don't get offended or think it's weird. They're like, because the name, the word that we love most in the world is our own name, isn't it, Michelle? And
No.
as long as I don't use it crazily too often, Michelle, and make you feel like I'm just saying Michelle all the time, Michelle. But if I use it a couple of times, or if I ask her about it, or if I write it down, that actually, yeah, it
You
shows
feel
that you care.
special. Yeah.
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 Mm.
So writing down the information that
Yeah.
has just been given to you and then repeating it back. And you repeat it back as NITS, NITS.
Great.
And so nature, intent, time, special circumstances. And that's fantastic for aviation. You think, how can I use that in my everyday?
Okay.
The so in a business, if you need to get information or you need something completed in a certain way within a certain time frame with nuances. That's not a normal part of their role.
Yes.
You would do it exactly NITS. So you would say, I need you to, and then give the information, the nature,
Hmm.
because give them the backstory why they need it. So the intent, I need it done within this time, and I will be following up at this time. And then any special circumstances are you might get pushback on this, or you'll have to look or go and speak to this person to get that extra information.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. That's just so clear, isn't it? It's interesting because it's very similar to something that I teach that I call complete communication, which is, although mine's probably way too long, Elliot, 6 things. I like that it's four. The 6 things are sharing, for me, it's sharing what you want done, when you want it done, why you want it done, and how you want it done. So there's
Yes,
no misunderstanding about that, none of that kind of like, oh, I've asked you to do this. And then you come back later. And have you ever had that scenario where someone's done something completely different? And you're
yes,
like, why did you do that? Oh, I thought you asked me to do it because of X, Y, Z, right? So you get super clear, especially if it's something specific or not a regular routine task. You wouldn't have to always explain the why. But if you do share the what, when, what, why, and how, and then you share what's the benefit for you and the benefit for them, this is more around the power of influence. Like
yes,
we're all motivated by the WIFM factor, the what's in it for me. So if someone isn't doing what you want them to, I talk about, we need to not just share the what, when, why, and how, but also what's the benefit, and most of all, the benefit for them.
yes,
And I
yeah.
love that you talked about writing things down. I actually just grabbed, I had little notepads under my table. And last week I was doing a coaching session with someone. He had this difficult discussion where one of his colleagues or one of his team members essentially kept going around and around and around in circles, trying to ask if they could do something a certain way, which was not possible. And I said, perhaps what you could do is grab a pen and paper and write down. So just remember, we can't do this all at the same time.
Mm.
Write it down in black and white. So therefore, we're going to have to do it differently. Let's talk about how we're going to do it differently. And, it can just be a way to kind of a circuit breaker. So I love the
Mm.
idea of the repeating back and the writing down.
Yeah, it's also that tactileness as well. Like these days, we put everything in our phone,
Yeah.
but just that action of writing down, you one make the person feel important. You're taking it seriously because you are writing down the information. And we even started saying this is a NITS brief, so they
Wow.
know.
Good.
So it's like an agenda. You
Yeah.
know exactly what's going to happen. And I've been in businesses and we've implemented NITS into their communication strategies. And when things go wrong, so critical thinking, if they've got even for innovation, so they can follow that same format in pitching, presenting. So yeah.
So powerful. I can just see, yeah, how effective this is. Now, the thing that I've most quoted you on lately has been this f or triple F or three Fs or whatever we're going to call it.
Yeah.
So can you just share for me, how does an airline pilot or airline captain use FFF? And then let's look at how we can use it in our day to day.
So again, mainly in aviation, we're hearing word. We don't get to see people necessarily because we're on radios. Even our co-pilot, the first officer, they're beside us. So we're looking at instruments, and if we have to turn our head to get further information, body language and things, it doesn't really work for us.
Okay.
So there's the way I used it when I presented it to PSANZ is for calling out the elephant in the room or calling out something that's going not to plan. So rather than just walking through pretending that there's a kerfuffle happening, or pretending there's no kerfuffle at the back of the room, and the rest of everybody is now focused on what's happening in the back of the room, and you're at the front trying to look at me, look, there's nothing wrong, look at this hand, sort of thing. So the 3 F's stand for fact,
Yes.
feeling, and frame. So how I did it is fact, feeling, which is the love hands, and frame, like a Vogue dance, Vogue.
Yeah.
But
So
that's,
memorable. Yeah.
yeah. So I've also, so not only can you do it for if you're giving a presentation or if you're trying to get everyone on the same page, but also it's a great way to for yourself, for personal. If you're told information, again, you don't have that context because it might be text, it might be over the phone, radio. It's not, you're not getting the body language prompts and extra information from that, and you don't necessarily have the context. So fact is, what is it? What are the actual words? And then feeling, why is it making me feel angry, frustrated, insulted, whatever, which I'm guilty of feeling this. Someone says something to me and I'm like, what? And I take great offense. And really, if I look at the facts, it's not offensive at all. But because of my mindset at the time, it's, I take it that way. And then framing it. So actually, like you said, what's in it for me? That's what everyone's concerned about, really, in communication. So how does this affect me? How is it affecting the person? And what is it that we're actually discussing? So fact, feeling, frame, I use myself in my everyday as well. So it's that thing of, if my husband says something and I get a bit like, oh, or the kids, or if I notice they're a bit funny, I can make sure we do the FFF. The facts are, you might be feeling this, or I can see you're feeling this, or I'm feeling this. What I understand is, and then you put it in the framework of what you think is coming across. Again, it ties into NITS because it's that thing of, you're discussing it, you're saying it out loud, and there's an opportunity for the other person to go, no, that's not what I meant, or this is where we're going instead.
Exactly. And I really love that it's the stating the fact, calling it out, and then linking into the feelings, which is so important, whether that's I'm noticing that you seem to be feeling this, or I'm feeling this, whatever it is. Again, as soon as we label feelings, it helps those feelings to dissipate, particularly if they're unpleasant feelings. So give me a real quick scenario. I'm sitting on a flight, you're on the flight deck, something's going on. What might you say in a scenario? Just give me a run through.
Sure. If I was using, so I used to even use NITS for giving a PA, because
Yeah.
it's what's happening, where we're going to go, how long it's going to take, and what's going to happen when we get there. So it was a very easy way to do a PA. We trained for 6 days as a captain on how to give a PA.
Yeah.
So a public announcement. And I at the PSA NZ thing, I turned my back on everyone because it's like, well, that's what I'm used to, not seeing anyone.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So run me through one.
okay, so if I use FFF, for example, that's a really good one. We went through, and I told this to you, we went through turbulence on the way to Auckland, and there was nothing came from the flight deck, but the flight attendant, the cabin crew, actually, she called out the turbulence. There was a woman who was really scared sitting next to me, or near me, and she actually got down to her level and she named it. So she said what it was, that turbulence. And then she actually named the emotion, the feeling. She said, that's scary, isn't it? Like, that can feel really scary because you don't know what's happening. She explained then, she reframed it and said, it was, just think of it as potholes in the sky, and the captain's just changed lanes and now it's going to be smooth. And that I think I mentioned that at the end, when we all collected our bags, it was a group of women, and they actually, the one who was scared was saying what a great flight that was. That's the best flight she's ever been on. And yet there was, turbulence, which I don't mind, but it is uncomfortable, and especially if you don't know what's happening. So
And
just
that's the power of turning it around, isn't it? I just relating to your example before, thinking about, the other night I was working away and I realized, oh, I was supposed to already start cooking dinner. And I can remember going into the house, going into my husband's office, he was also working away, saying, Babe, I've just realized that it's 5:20 and I was supposed to start cooking at 5. Feeling a little bit rushed and under pressure now. So would you be able to come and help me? Can we do it together? So it's just again, and I probably wasn't even thinking about it being those three things, but it was like, this is the fact and I'm owning it and I'm, opening up about it. And this is how I feel now, feeling under pressure and reframing. Okay, so this is how we're going to respond. This is what we're going to do now.
yeah. And
Um,
what tends to happen in communication is you start with the fact and then you try and frame it without that emotion in the
yeah.
middle.
Or you just come and walk in and go, can you come and help me cook? Can you come and
Yeah,
help me cook? Or yeah, and so then suddenly the feelings are just actually spilling over, again, or in a work setting, walking into the room and just infecting everyone else with whatever the feeling is that's going to perhaps bring your team down,
yeah,
being able to take a deep breath and say, okay, team. We've just found out that we no longer have the 20 minutes to do the brief today for the pitch that we've prepared. We've actually only got 4 minutes. Okay. Now I know that this is a short amount of time, and you might be thinking, how can we make it work? But I've got some ideas and I want to get your input. Let's trim this down to what are the essential things that we want people to walk away and what can we send as a follow-up. Okay. So you can imagine that if a leader comes in and does that, that suddenly they're actually creating calm and problem solving in their team rather than let's all panic.
that's it. So naming the fact that you actually have reduced time, you could be panicking, how are we going to get this done? But the actual thing is that we can really crunch it down, no fluff, and just give the absolute points now, and then with a takeaway that they can. So
Mhm.
again, if otherwise, yeah, everyone knows that you've cut the time down, but then if you don't have enough information, people start to fill in their own minds and gossip and the whole thing just starts to get bigger and bigger than it needs to be because they don't have enough information.
Yeah,
So
I love that. So this is really key then, again, in families and personal relationships and in the workplace to avoid the whispers, the assumptions, the misunderstandings.
yes, yes, because we all have expectations, whereas you're laying it out with the knit with knits, you're calling the what's actually happening with the FFF or the triple F or the FFF. I've really got to come up with a name for that, don't
I quite like fuh.
I?
But it's so simple. So again, if you're watching, if you're not already, head to the thrivetvshow.com where you can see the show and it's name the fact, like hold up your index finger, this is the fact. Think about the feelings. You can do the little love heart
Yes,
and then reframe it. So, doing a frame. And I loved that memory anchor that you gave us because I think again, I've now noticed examples of times when I have used this and it can be so quick,
yes,
just stating the fact, being open, owning it, acknowledging how people feel. It just that leads into the reframe. I think sometimes we're told, oh, you should reframe your thoughts, but actually this leads you into it really nicely.
yeah, yeah. No, it's helped me, and I love helping others. So a version of it, at least, can help.
Yeah. And I love that you shared something along the lines of, this is the captain speaking. You may notice that the right-hand engine is on fire and you may feel concerned about this. However, we are going to get you landed and we'll have you on the ground in 15 minutes. I don't know if I did that quite right. I
Yeah,
haven't
no,
done six days
you
training,
sound
but again,
trustworthy
it's
and know what you're doing. Yeah.
yeah. So I loved that.
Yeah, so I'd love to know if other people can use it and if they use a version of it. So I'm going to say I'm lazy. So you're six. I've cut it down to four, and then with
Love
knits,
it.
and then even shorter with FFF. I'm a simple person that needs a simple acronym or mnemonic
Yes.
to just make it work.
Yeah, I love it. And I think the key thing is that you are removing all the assumptions. This is the key thing I talk about in communication, is that so often we say something and maybe we think about what we want to say, and then what we actually say is sometimes different or not the full story. And there's often a whole lot of assumptions that we've got. Like we ask someone to do something and we think we know when we want it done by, and we know how it should be done. We know why it's important. but we only say, 20% or 50% of whatever that information was. Then there's what the other person thinks they hear, what they actually hear, and then what they understand and what they act on. So it's this whole bridge between you and the other person. You got to realize that there's all these opportunities for like kind of like bricks to be falling off the bridge until there's virtually nothing actually, getting through of value of substance. They're not understanding what you need. So
Yeah.
can you share any stories or examples of where, where this has been important or where you've used this or where you've seen this used with your clients?
Yeah, so in flying, I can probably, I was flying from, I just completed 6 months at Virgin Australia, who I was working for. So I had my 6 month probation as a first officer. And so I was wild to go fly with any captains, not just training captains. And I was flying from Perth to Sydney, and it was a red eye, which in New Zealand, you guys know all about because quite often across the ditch we are doing red eyes. And the weather, I looked at the weather chart and all of the information, as did the captain, and I saw that there was a high pressure system over Sydney. There was potentially going to be fog, a high probability of fog,
Okay.
but it wasn't on the written forecast. But the forecast was only for so many hours. So we were arriving at 6 a.m. I anticipated there was going to be fog. I told the captain, he said no. I wanted extra fuel. He said no. I then realized that I wasn't comfortable going on this flight with only that fuel. So
Wow.
I ultimately walked off the flight deck before passengers came, saying, well, if you're not going to take my fuel, I'm going to go. Thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my job because here I am, a relatively new employee stating that I want this. And I had all my reasons and worked out. Anyway, I told my manager, I rang him in Sydney, and it all went down that he said, look, just tell the captain you're going to take the fuel. I said, no, I've walked off the aircraft. So he rang that captain. The captain came to the door and said, get on. And I said, well, are you going to take the fuel? And he said, yes. And it was like, maybe I should have asked for more. But I didn't. I sat down. It was very uncomfortable. Now, that flight, of course, we arrived in Sydney. It was fog. I didn't say I told you so. And we did land, but we needed the extra fuel. Now, I then just avoided flying with him as often as I could.
Right.
Years later, though, I flew with him and we were in Bali on an overnight, and it came up and he was a bit more chill. And I said, what? So then I used and I'd been conveying through NITS why I wanted the fuel. I thought I was communicating correctly. It finally came out that he had had an argument with management about fuel and he had been taking too much. So they threatened him that there would be disciplinary action if he continued to take too much fuel.
Wow. So there's all this extra context that you had no idea of at
Correct,
the time,
correct.
that was this resistance on his part.
Yeah. So then
Oh,
we did equivalent of FFF on the overnight. Mind you, we both had a bintang, we both had a beer. So the conversation was flowing a little easier, but he told me the facts, what he was feeling, so what that made him do. So he'd been reprimanded. So his feeling was, stick it to the company, right, I'll show you. And so therefore he framed it as, I'm only going to take the fuel that the company tells me to and no more. Now,
wow.
it's not a danger thing on that because there are lots of airports on the way that we could have landed at.
Yeah.
But so then
Inconvenience, professionalism, the passengers that want to obviously land in Sydney.
that's it. That's it. And it would have cost the company a lot of money if we did have to divert. So again, that was his version of up you to the company. So I then did my thing of FFF. So I told him what I was seeing as a new first officer was that you were not considering me at all. I felt like you were dangerous and that you thought I was, not worthy of consultation. And therefore, I never wanted to fly with you again because I saw you as a cowboy pilot, all of
Yeah.
this. And he was deeply offended and surprised.
Yeah.
No, I'm not like that. So he changed his tune. But if we'd had that discussion, it would have been a very different outcome.
And how did that affect your relationship from then? I mean, I don't know if you connected
Yeah, so I
since
then
then?
flew with him. I flew with him other times, and it was very open. And that was the thing, because we'd done that, we'd laid this is why that. So you'd given the facts, how it made you feel and what it made you then do. We could communicate that so easily from then on. And he also then employed that for other first officers. So he became one of the guys that people wanted to fly with, rather than the one that they talked about, oh, he's that captain. So.
Yeah. So interesting. You have so many interesting stories, which I know is why you've written this book, your Lady MacGyver book. Being a huge MacGyver fan, just if anyone doesn't know of MacGyver, I've got the music going in my head right now. MacGyver was very big, what was it, in the 80s and 90s? And
Yes.
he essentially, my dad always used to be like, why doesn't he just use a gun? But he basically would get out of all these different scenarios, usually just using like some chewing gum and a piece of tinfoil or something.
That's right, yes.
Very innovative and always found ways around things. So just tell me a bit about why is the title of the book Lady MacGyver? Tell me a bit about that.
So I was given that nickname early on in my aviation career. I flew smaller aircraft, and they weren't maintained as well as what airline aircraft are. And so quite often, remote areas, you had to come up with a fix yourself. And almost like the chewing gum and the tinfoil, there were a couple of instances where I had to improvise. So you mentioned flying across the Pacific Ocean with little aeroplanes in the TED Talk. So coming up with ways of getting extra fuel and oil into the engine. The undercarriage collapsed when I was out at a rural community, and the townspeople actually all came together and helped me. But we used plumbing pipe and tire inner tubes and things to limp back to Sydney where it could be fixed. So it was always that thing of having to look at what you had and then improvising.
Amazing. I'm just looking back at my phone notes because as I was reading your book, there was one thing that really stood out, and it was the story that you shared about you'd just gone through all of these hoops to get the money and create the time, and you'd paid upfront for a whole year of flying lessons because you decided that you were actually going to not turn your back on the childhood dream to become a pilot. And there's the whole backstory. I recommend people read it. And so you're there in one of your first lessons, and every lesson, all you can do is vomit. And just it was incredible how you talked about how your instructor actually came alongside you and helped to turn that around. Do you want to share a bit about that story? I just think it's so
Yeah, so
fun.
well, like you said, I finally got the money together, paid for all my flying up front for 12 months. I was older. I wasn't a young girl when I started flying. And my very first lesson, I threw up, I vomited. And, that whole thing of, oh my goodness, one, it's embarrassing, but two, what have I done? I've got this huge loan. I've sold my house, my car. I'm not working at the moment because I'm learning to fly. And that happened for a couple of flights. The first three flights, I threw up every lesson. And after the third lesson, I sat there in the aircraft. My junior instructor had gone into the building, and the owner of the flying school, the chief flying instructor, he came out and he sat next to me and he said, Michelle, how are you going? And that thing of you trying to hold it together and then someone's nice to you, then tears were threatening to come down, and I was wanting to be, in the boys' club, and no, I'm good. And I said, I think I've made a mistake. And he said, why? Like, it's just vomit. And I said, yeah, but how many airline captains do you know who vomit every flight? And he said, Michelle, just keep going until you can't. And
That's
that
it.
was
That's the line that I underlined, like Michelle, just keep going until you can't.
that's it. That's it. And that just means whatever that means for you. And sometimes that means getting up and sitting on the lounge for the day. Like if that's your best that day, that's good on you. And your best doesn't mean doing 100, your best is 100% of what you can give at the time. So showing up the next lesson was keep going until you can't. It was, again, it was only vomit. It was not, it wasn't life-threatening or anything. It didn't stop me. And even if things did stop me, I still kept hearing him, keep going until you can't. So it's like, there's got to be another way, or well, how can I use this? So
Interesting how we have those things that sink into our mind, and also at a practical level, I loved that, I can just imagine how devastating it must have felt to have invested in this dream and then feeling like I'm not physically capable of doing this. This is just not going to work. Like that just must have been such a difficult situation, and that he recommended actually, just feeling out of control. And that if you could study and you could brief him on the next lesson, then that, got into perhaps the logical part of your brain to shift away. And obviously, I imagine now that you probably fly without feeling airsick.
That's it. Yeah. But even any of that, it's that sometimes, and I saw it with my mum and my sister, it's that not knowing what's going on. And I taught them to fly because they used to get scared in small planes in turbulence. Like my sister would be clinging onto the ceiling of the little plane and, squealing. And then when I showed her what, she flew, told her what was happening with the turbulence, told her what the clouds, what they would feel like if you went in those clouds, or the weather and heat and so forth. So yeah, she was like, oh, I know how to do it now. And she's never been scared ever since.
Yeah, knowledge is power, isn't it?
Yes,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I just think there's so much gold in what we've shared around communication, so many practical takeaways for people. And if people wanted to connect with you, Michelle, or wanted to find out more, what's the best way to connect with you?
Oh, I'd love to connect with as many people as I can. Probably LinkedIn would be, find me on there. If you're not on LinkedIn, go to the website, which is in the show notes that Lauren's got. But please reach out. I love hearing everybody's stories, and just, that thing of I'm not really telling my stories to highlight me. It's opening the way for other people's stories, because they often think, oh, okay, because I'll tell silly stories, but that doesn't mean that their story is any less or any more or anything. Everyone has stories, and just hearing someone else tell a story often reframes how your story is in your mind as well.
Yeah, so powerful. Highly recommend everyone checks out Michelle's TED Talk. Such a powerful story. And she starts right in the gripping moment when you feel like everything's going wrong. And then, obviously, spoiler alert, she's still alive today. So, yeah, but just some of the things that you've done, I don't know what it's called, where a plane goes upside down underwater and you have to escape in the dark. That just sounded incredibly intense. So the things that I know that you have pushed yourself to do, the glass ceilings that you've broken, the, outdated paradigms that you've pushed through, I just take my hat off to you. So much love and respect. Yeah, really, really value what you bring, and amazing stories. So encourage people, do head out, do support Michelle, do grab the book. You will love it. So many funny and terribly embarrassing stories that you just share very openly. And I love what you shared today around NITS. So understand the nature, clarify the nature, the intent, the time, and the special circumstances. And name the fact, call it out, acknowledge the feeling, and then reframe it. Look at us. Beautiful. If there's one final thing that you want to share, Michelle, just as we wrap up, what would that be?
I think it's something I mentioned before is the fact that if somebody is not getting the information, if you're getting frustrated that they're not understanding you, it's on you, not on them. So yeah, just put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, that's so great, isn't it? And trying to figure out what is the breakdown? How do we get around this? And yeah, pausing and slowing down and doing that and using all these techniques. So good. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a joy to connect with you. Thank you so much to everyone that has tuned in. That's another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.